welcome, and like to just introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and what your background was and currently is.
All right. So thank you for having me, firstly. My name is Joanne Johnson. I started out on my auto journey at a very young age. It came about through my dad, who was somebody who loved racing. He had a little old kind of vintage car, a Austin Mini Metro, that he and his friends sorted out and they used to go driving a lot. So I used to spend a lot of time as a young child at the garage.
Okay.
So that's where my love started. Um, and I was never very, what you'd call it, no, the traditional kind of girl. I was a tomboy from early.
Of course.
So
Daddy,
yes,
Daddy, Daddy basically wanted a boy.
daddy had a boy as well. So
Really?
it was both
Okay.
of us, yes. My brother is older than I am.
Okay.
Right. So we were both introduced to it from very early.
Hmm.
I grew up, went to high school, decided that I wanted to venture down a different path after high school, and actually ended up going to Jamaica German Automotive School,
Oh yes, Jagas. Yes.
right, Jagas. So I was there, and the first year is full time, the second and third year, those are part time, and usually they try and get you to um, get some work experience during those 2 years.
Okay.
So that's where my work experience started. Um, and that was quite a number of years ago. I had a little foray in the automotive industry,
Oh,
right? It was
hold on.
good.
Just to back up. When you started at
Hmm.
Jagas, how many females were in your group?
I was the only female in my
The
group.
only female. Wow.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
That
But
that
I've
that's that
always gotten
that's
on
really
with
something.
guys. Yeah, I've always gotten on with guys well.
Okay.
So it wasn't really a challenge for me. I was actually coming out of an all-girls school.
Okay.
Um, went to Jagas as the only female in my group at the time. And I think after I had started, there was another female that came on
Hmm.
um, in the program. Yeah. So went to Jagas, got a job in my second year, worked in the industry, finished up Jagas, and then I actually went overseas to study.
Okay. We're overseas. If you could elaborate some more.
I went to Coventry in the UK.
Okay. Nice.
Mhm.
And I'm
And
trust you had a wonderful experience there.
it was interesting,
Okay.
definitely interesting.
Because you're going to a whole new culture at a very young age. So
Yes, very different culture,
right,
very
right.
different. And I wasn't quite in the more metropolitan area of, say, London. I
Okay.
was a bit out, kind of in the sticks, they call it at the time. And it was an interesting experience. I studied motorsports engineering,
Okay. Okay. Wow.
right?
Interesting. You see, I'm learning a lot as you go along. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah. Wow.
yeah.
No, continue. I want to hear more,
Um,
much more.
really. All right. So I, yeah, studied motorsports engineering. I was the first female to graduate the course at that university.
Wow.
And then came back home and decided that I would try my luck out here.
Okay.
Um, Unfortunately, it wasn't as easy as I thought it would have been.
Right.
So I had done some I had done some work in the motorsports industry locally before I went off to university.
Okay.
So I had good relationships with a lot of people there, and they all were excited for me when I was going away. And there was a lot of talk about, okay, when you come back, you're gonna be this big thing, and
Yes.
it
Yes.
didn't quite pan out that way,
Okay.
because of a couple of reasons, I guess. So it's one of those things in life. People are always say that they're willing to help and they have the best of intentions,
Right,
but when the rubber hits the road, it doesn't really pan out.
right,
And
right,
so it didn't pan out like that. So I never really got back into the motorsport industry locally. But after a while, I ended up going back to work at Jaggers in the commercial section around the back. And then I
okay.
moved on to ATL as advisor.
ATL.
Um,
But
mhm.
ATL was long after, like, what, late 2000? Um,
ATL would have been like 2012.
yeah, thereabouts. But
Yeah.
what was prior to 2012? It didn't work at Jaggers all the way to 2012.
Well, there was university. University was, I think, 2005 to 2009.
Right.
And then when I came back, I didn't get a job immediately
Okay.
because the recession had just, we were in the recession at that point in time. Recession had started, I think it was in 2008,
2008.
2009,
Yes.
right? So there was still kind of a lull. Um,
Okay.
so I ended up starting at Jaggers maybe in 2010, I want to say.
Okay.
Yeah, 2010. And I was there for a little while. And then
Be- Because I'm trying, my recollection about you was the first time I actually took notice about your presence was you were featured in the automotive magazine for the Jamaica Gleaner.
I was,
I remember that article very, very well.
I was,
There was a center
that
spread of
was,
you and your story, and the
my
promising
goodness.
up and coming lone female mechanic, and it was a wonderful piece. I
Oh
mean,
my gosh, that's such an exaggeration, though. I'm not, and I was not at the time the lone female mechanic. There were
well,
others who went
really,
before me. I guess,
okay,
right. I guess it's just that they didn't have the same level of publicity, maybe.
okay,
I
okay.
don't know
Well,
how
that is
I got
true.
to, I don't know how I was that fortunate, but
But
it
how did
happened.
you feel after that story? What was the sense of experience getting that publicity?
It was, I don't know, I guess it was like a little ego boost. I felt good about it. I felt
Right,
like, okay, things are shaping up for me to, take off in the automotive industry when I come back, because
right.
that piece was actually done, I think, one summer while I was back home from university or just after I came back from university,
Okay.
right? So I don't think as a matter of fact, I didn't finish university yet,
Oh, okay. Right, right,
right? Right. I
right.
didn't finish university yet. So it felt kind of preemptive, like,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And there was all of this like expectation that
Right,
came
right,
along with that.
right,
And it didn't work out like that. And that's just how life is.
right.
Yeah,
Because I know the motorsports industry, it's in Jamaica, it's really tough. It's all about who
it
knows who,
is.
and
It's very cliquey. It's
yes,
very cliquey.
yes, yes. I
And
tell me about it.
and the reality is that motorsports, generally speaking, is a very expensive sport,
Yes, it
right?
is.
So I mean, one can understand the cliquiness around it in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
For
Mm-hmm.
example, if I were to have a multi-million dollar car and I am buying tires for hundreds of thousands of dollars and all of these expensive parts,
Mm-hmm.
um, I'm not so sure that I would be willing to take a chance on somebody who is not tested, tried, and proven,
Right, right.
right?
That is so right. But
So,
it takes a lot because each car they have to have like more than 5 or 6 sponsorships just to maintain the car alone.
right, it's very
And
expensive.
yes,
So
it is.
I hold no ill will towards any of them.
Right.
Um, and if I buck up anybody on the road, we're still good. And that's, it's just one of those things in life.
Yes, yes. Yeah, well, much so. I mean, There are certain sections of the industry which is a cutthroat industry. So tell me about
Mhm.
it. So I understand exactly where you're
Yeah.
coming from. But after Jagas, it was ATL, and then or what happened there?
No, man, after Jagas, it was Sterling Motors,
Sterling Motors. Okay, yeah, the
right?
farmer. Yeah, Sterling Motors dealt with
BMW at
B.
the time.
Okay, yes. I'm
Yeah.
I'm getting up in age, so you have to see with me.
All right, Grams, relax. So, Sterling Motors was a really interesting experience for me. It
Right.
was my first apprenticeship, really. I had worked for a couple of months just before going to Sterling Motors, but I was more in the office. So
Okay.
Sterling Motors, I was actually an apprentice around the back in the service area with all the guys.
Right.
Um, that was really fun for me. It
Mm-hmm.
was a bit challenging at times because being new and being female, there are, whether females want to admit it or not, we do have limitations in terms
Okay.
of strength and, just ability to do certain things. It's a little more
Endurance.
difficult for us. No, I'm gonna be real. Okay.
Oh, I'm happy that I'm well. It's you're saying it. It's not me. I'm just listening. Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's just the reality. I mean,
Right.
it didn't negatively impact my ability to do the work,
Okay.
right? But it did take more out of me
Mhm.
to be able to do what the guys could easily do.
Right. I can imagine because I mean you're lifting tires for a X5, right?
Yeah,
And all those SUVs, and you're talking about the crankshaft. If you have to work on the engine, it's a lot. It takes a lot of strength to be lifting
it
those
does.
parts.
It does. But I mean, there are tricks in the trade, so you know how to leverage things, little ways
Mhm.
that you can get around it
Okay. Okay.
um, to get the job done. And
Right.
so I had to employ some of those tactics, but it was fine. And I got along really well with my peers
Okay.
and with my boss at the time. So it was a good experience for me.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mhm.
Um, but would you encourage other females to get into it?
I definitely would. I would say that if it's something that you enjoy doing, something that you have a passion for,
Right.
I would definitely recommend it.
Okay, okay. Well, sounds good because most females I see, they're mostly service writers, service advisors. So, not much you see around the back working. The ones that I actually saw, they worked for a while and then they said, this is not working out for them, and then they move on. But I mean, after a while, the passion dies. But it all depends on what your goals are. But let me not ramble anymore because your story is far more interesting.
Hmm.
So
So
during Sterling Motors, what was the experience like in terms of? I know you mentioned the challenges being a female, you got around it, but what about the dealership overall? What was the dealership experience was in terms of what were the outcomes?
well, the dealership experience overall was pretty good for me in terms of the level of trainings that were available
Right.
for us as technicians, right? So there was a lot of information and training modules that we were able to engage in
Okay.
via the whatever internet and stuff. So we had a training area that we could do those stuff on.
Right.
um, get information on the special tools that were needed for that specific make of vehicle. The interaction with other departments, so for example, the parts department, that was great. I think there was only at the time, I recall one female in the parts department.
Okay.
Um, right, she was pretty cool. I never had any challenges there.
Hmm.
The service writers or advisors tended to be female.
Hmm. Yeah, I
Um,
mentioned it earlier, and that seems to be
yeah,
the norm
the
everywhere.
trend,
Yeah,
it is.
it is. Yeah.